Hey, yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. This is Smart TCG, and today I'm going to be going over some of the brand new cards that were most recently revealed at the Japan Champions League in Kyoto. This is going to be the brand new set Wild Force and Cyber Judge cards that will be releasing in Japan on January 26th, and it will be called in the United States, in the Western world in general, Temporal Forces, which will be releasing in March. So this is going to be the next major set that is going to be releasing, to my knowledge, and it's going to shake up the format quite a bit, as A-Specs will be returning. There are brand new ancient Pokemon and future Pokemon as well that we'll be diving into here. But with that being said, if you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It's the best way to help me out as a creator. And also let me know what cards you are most excited about. Let me know, which ones you think are really good, which ones are, underrated in my opinion, and just your overall opinions. I'd love to hear from you. But anyways, today we're going to be going over all these cards, kind of going over exactly which ones are good, which ones are going to be relatively mediocre, and which ones I expect to be the best from the brand new sets. But anyways, hopping into it here, we got Gouging Fire EX. Fire Pokemon with 230 HP, most importantly, is an ancient Pokemon as well, which does mean that this is going to be able to be used with Professor Sada's Vitality. Professor Sada's Vitality is a very powerful card. However, ancient Pokemon are relatively mediocre as of right now, with Roaring Moon being the main ancient Pokemon. Now you get the other brand new ancient cards coming out from this brand new set that is going to help Professor Sada's Vitality quite a bit. And first off, we have Gouging Fire, which is an ancient Pokemon, meaning you can Sada's Vitality to it. Its first attack, Heat Blast, dealing 60 damage, relatively mediocre, but its second attack is what's quite interesting. Exploding Flare, dealing 260 damage, and this Pokemon can't use Exploding Flare again until it leaves the active spot. So this card, first off, people look at it as a potential Charizard EX partner. I think this works very nicely as a one-of with Charizard EX, and also works great just in a Professor Sada's Vitality box style deck. I think has a lot of potential. But Charizard, I think, is where this card is definitely going to find its home, because Charizard is an incredibly powerful deck. However, it doesn't do a whole lot of damage early game because its base is 180 and then does 30 more for every prize card your opponent has taken. So if they haven't taken any prize cards yet, they're not doing a ton of damage. So having the option to Exploding Flare and power it up really quickly with Charizard X's ability actually I think makes a lot of sense. I think that this definitely could be a one-of in that deck for sure. Moving on, we have Walking Wake EX, another ancient Pokemon with its ability Cerulean Pulse. Damage from this Pokemon's attack is not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So anything that could be blocking this Pokemon's attacks, any type of ability, is not going to work. Its attack, Catherius Roar, dealing 120 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is affected by any special condition, this attack does 120 more damage. So 240 damage for 3 is relatively okay. I don't necessarily think it's overwhelming in any way. I definitely think that Gouging Fire has a little bit more potential, but maybe pair this up with Brute Bonnet, some type of special condition deck, and maybe you pick up some pretty quick knockouts, dealing 240 on turn 2, which definitely seems pretty solid. You could pair this up with Palkia as well. There's definitely some cool water Pokemon that you could pair it up with, but I don't necessarily think it's overwhelming in any way. Moving on, we have arguably the most interesting one out of the 3, Raging Bolt EX. Its first attack, Bursting Roar. You discard your hand and draw 6 cards. It's a decent attack, not necessarily something overwhelming, but as a first attack for 1 colorless, discard, draw 6, definitely is quite solid, can get you out of those sketchy situations. Now, its attack, Extreme Ascent, is where a lot of people think this card has the most potential, dealing 70 damage, and you may discard any amount of basic energy attached to your Pokemon in play, and this attack does 70 damage for each card you discarded this way. This has a lot of potential, most importantly because it reads you may discard any amount of basic energy attached to your Pokemon in play, which does not specify the type of energy, and it does not specify exactly where you have to discard them from. So this does take a Lightning and a Fighting, which are quite awkward types to be able to easily power up this Pokemon, but with Sada's Vitality you can fix that. So you can maybe pair this up with some type of Pokemon that loads a bunch of different other, types of energies onto the bench. Maybe pair it up with Baxcalibur because it doesn't specify what energies you discard. I'm not 100% sure, but The fact that this card allows you to discard any type of energy has to be basic, though, I think gives it a lot of potential. So I think this card is interesting. It's definitely not going to be the easiest Pokemon to, power up and be able to deal, tons of damage over and over again. But if someone finds the right combination of cards to make this work, it has a lot of potential, because anything that, pretty much has an unlimited damage cap, I think has some potential. And this attack can do an insane amount of damage depending on how many energy you discard. I think it has some potential. Moving on here, we have Fluttermane. Another ancient Pokemon here with the ability Fluttering Dusk. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon has no abilities except for Fluttering Dusk. So some people have been comparing this card to Klefki. Klefki is a card that's ability blocks, I believe, all basic Pokemon on the field, and this one blocks just any Pokemon, but it has to be in the active. So a little bit different of an ability for sure, but I think that this definitely has some potential. I originally read this first as it blocks all abilities when it's in the active spot, which made it similar to the Wobbuffet of the past, which was very, very powerful in lots of different decks, but it's not actually that powerful. Fluttering Dust, though, is a decent ability. I think definitely has some potential. Moving on here to Explorer's Guidance. It's a trainer card for anyone that remembers this effect. Look at the top 6 cards of your deck and put 2 of them into your hand and discard the other cards. This is very similar to Hapu. Hapu was a card a few years ago that saw some play in certain decks. I believe decks like Blacephalon played it and stuff like that. So this card has some potential. Just looking at the top 6 cards and putting 2 of them into your hand is just decent. Maybe this is played in maybe a type of Gardevoir deck to, try and get the 2 cards you need into the hand and you, discard the other energies. Not entirely sure. Maybe it's played in Miraidon to get energies in the discard pile and, take the 2 generators, hopefully, that you find off Explorer's Guidance. Not 100% sure, but I think this card definitely has some potential as it has seen success in previous formats as Hapu. Now it just has a different name, but the same effect. So anyways, pretty cool card. Definitely has some potential. Moving on here, we have Iron Leaves EX, a future Pokemon with that ability Rapid Vernier. Once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may switch this Pokemon with your active Pokemon. If you do, you may move any number of energy from your bench Pokemon to this Pokemon. So very similar to the Surfetch, where you took energies from your other Pokemon and put it onto it when it went into the active. That was a fighting Pokemon. This was a grass Pokemon, and it has the Prismatic Edge attack, which deals 180 damage during your next turn. This Pokemon can attack. Its damage is admittedly relatively weak. However, it is grass, which does mean that it does hit weakness against Charizard EX. Charizard EX, one of the most powerful decks currently in the standard format. So that, I think, is what people have been talking about, is some way to power this up if you can. It makes a great counter to one of the best decks in format, being Charizard. Moving on, we have Iron Crown, probably the most interesting future Pokemon that was released with Cobalt Commander. Your future Pokemon's attacks, excluding any Iron Crown EX, do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. As this ability translates, as of right now, it does stack, which means if you have 4 on the field, then your future Pokemons do up to 80 more damage. So that is quite good. I think that this makes future Pokemon significantly better. There are some other future Pokemon that we will talk about in a little bit that the Cobalt Commander works very nicely with. It also works with things like Iron Hands as of right now, turning Ampu very much into dealing, upwards of 200 damage now potentially, which is, pretty nice. So Cobalt Commander, definitely a really, really good ability. Unfortunately, its attack is admittedly kind of terrible. For 3 energies, this attack does 50 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. It's just not a very powerful attack. It's mainly here for its ability, but its ability is incredibly powerful and makes this one of the most interesting cards that was released. Moving on here, we have Iron Boulder EX with the Repulsor Axe, dealing 60 damage. If this Pokemon takes damage from an attack during your opponent's next turn, you put 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So can do effectively 140, which is okay, not necessarily something super overwhelming. And then Power Stamp, dealing 200 damage. You discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. It's okay. Moving on, we have Iron Thorns. This is one of the more interesting ones as well. With the Destro Press, 70 damage, and you reveal the top 5 cards of your deck. This attack does 70 damage for each future card you find there, and you discard the future cards you revealed in this way and shuffle the other cards back into your deck. So with some other cards we're about to go into, this definitely has some potential, being able to deal a bajillion damage is definitely quite good. And it's also not the hardest Pokemon to power up, as it is a basic Pokemon and only takes a lightning and a colorless. So I think it has a potential. The fact that it can do over 300 damage definitely, I think, makes it a thing to look at in the future. I think that it definitely is one of the cards that I think has potential in this set. And specifically with what it could have potential with is Cryptomaniac's Deciphering. Cryptomaniac's Deciphering is pretty much the same effect as Mallow in the past. Mallow was a card that allowed you to search your deck for 2 cards and you shuffle your deck and put those cards on top of it in any order. That's exactly what Cryptomaniac's Deciphering is. So this is a really, really good card, you know, with things like Refinement Curlia. You can use Cryptomaniac's Deciphering and then Refinement into them. Anything that just allows you to draw cards, you can use with Cryptomaniac's Deciphering really, really nicely to put, you know, pretty much 2 cards into your hand almost effectively if you have an ability that allows you to draw into it. This could potentially work with Iron Thorns as well, as you can Cryptomaniac Deciphering 2 future things onto the top of the deck, and then that's instantly 140 damage right off the bat. So definitely has a lot of potential for sure. I think this card is quite good, and I would not be surprised if it saw play in the future. Moving on here, we have a Neo Upper Energy. We're going to be hopping into our A-Specs. A-Specs were cards way back in the day that saw success over 10 years ago, actually. About 10 years ago, they were in the standard format. And they have a lot of potential, but you can only play one of them in your deck. You have to choose one A-Spec, and that's all you can play. You can only play one A-Spec in your deck. So Neo Upper Energy, as long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides colorless energy. As long as Pokemon is attached to a Stage 2 Pokemon, it provides every type of energy, but provides only 2 energy at a time. So counts as 2 of any energy, but only provides 2 energy at a time, though. So it can't count as 2 double turbos, for example, or something like that, right? It has to count as 2 different, you know, colored energies. So it's decent. I don't think it's necessarily overwhelming in any way. The problem is with a couple of these A-Specs that we're about to go into, I don't know if there's a reason to play this over any of the other ones, but I think it does help out Stage 2 decks, makes them a little bit more powerful, and I definitely think could see some play in some things. I know some people have been calling it just a terrible card. I don't think it's that bad. I think it has some potential, and as more, you know, potentially powerful Stage 2s and stuff like that come out, then I could definitely see this seeing play. It has potential for sure. Anyways, moving on to the card that most people, I feel like, have been talking about. We have Prime Catcher. This is admittedly one of the most powerful cards that have ever been created. It reads, switch one of your opponent's benched Pokemon to the active spot. If you do, switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. So it is pretty much very similar to Cross Switcher, except you do not need 2 of them to use the card. The reason why Cross Switcher requires 2 to be used is to balance the card. If you could play 4 of these cards in any deck, that would be admittedly ridiculous. So that's why this is an A-Spec card. And they pretty much just, you know, similar to Cross Switcher, you just do not need the other, you know, piece of Cross Switcher, but you switch and they switch as well. So pretty much is a boss's orders, but you also have to switch. So very similar, actually pretty much exactly like Guzma, which was a card that was played before boss's orders came into the format, but it's an item card, which is ridiculously powerful. So you can research into a Gust Effect, which is crazy. They only you to 1, and you find maybe like an Arven or, you know, some card, you know, that allows you to search for, you know, Prime Catcher. Really, really powerful. This card is great. This thing is going to see play in a lot of different decks. Anything that can search it out or just naturally drawn into it. You know, it's amazing. It's going to see a lot of play. I think it's by far the best card that was revealed. Moving on here, we have Koraidon EX, Dragon type with 230 HP. First attack, Vengeful Hammer, deals 20 damage. This attack does 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. And Kaiser Tackle deals 280, and it deals 60 itself. So 280 for 3 energy is actually not bad, especially when you take into account that you can Professor Sada's Vitality to it. I don't think this card is bad. I think this card is going to see some play. In some type of Professor Sada's box, maybe. I think it is good. I think 280 for 3 is just strong. It's just a really, really powerful attack. And especially for 3 energy, that it's admittedly not super hard to power up. So yeah, pretty good card. Moving on here, we have Great Tusk. Nothing really much to say here. You deal 180 damage if your opponent's bench Pokemon has any damage counters on them. Attack does 100 more damage. So 180 for 3 is not terrible. As a basic Pokemon. It's not necessarily anything super powerful, though. Sandy Shocks, If you have 3 or more energy in play, this attack does 70 more damage. Attack is infected by weakness. So if you play some fighting deck, which probably has at least 3 energy in play, you're typically going to be doing 90 for 1, which is not bad. And then Power Gem dealing 60 isn't too terrible. Screamtail, Songful Encouragement, heal 100 damage from one of your benched ancient Pokemon, and then Hyper Voice dealing 40 damage. Not too bad. Rhydon EX, basic Pokemon Future. Repulsion Bolt, 60 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it, this attack does 100 and more damage, so dealing 160 for 2 energy. Not necessarily super powerful, but Cyber Drive dealing 220 damage during your next turn. This Pokemon can't use Cyber Drive, so 220 is a lot more respectable, especially when you pair it up with Iron Crown EX. You'll be doing a lot more damage as it is a future Pokemon, so that has some potential. Moving on, we have Iron Hands. You paralyze if you flip heads for 2 energy, not necessarily too great. Super Alloy Hands, 80 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is a Pokemon EX or V. It does 80 more, 160. Kind of mediocre, not necessarily super powerful. Iron Valiant is kind of the same as well, dealing 20 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, also 20 to the active. And then Zen Blade dealing 120 damage during your next turn's Pokemon can't use Zen Blade. Not necessarily super special here, along with Iron Jugulus with the ability Auto Fighter. If this Pokemon is in the active spot and takes damage from an opponent's attack, put 3 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. It's just a recoil for 30, which is not necessarily a ton of damage, only has 130, and its attack is not necessarily super special. But there is another card that we'll finally be talking about, which is Master Ball, which is also an A-Spec card. We used to have this card back when A-Specs were first originally released. And the card wasn't necessarily played a whole lot because we had cards like Computer Search and Dowsing Machine and other really powerful things like Scramble Switch, Life Dew. There were lots of other incredibly powerful A-Spec cards that we had, which really didn't give us any reason to play Master Ball. However, really as of right now, the only A-Spec that's been released that I think a lot of people will be playing is Prime Catcher. So maybe there's some deck that doesn't necessarily need an extra gust effect and they can just use Master Ball, which Master Ball just simply reads you search your deck for any Pokemon. Doesn't matter if it's a stage 1, a basic, a stage 2, does not matter. You search your deck for it, you put it into your hand, and you're done. So a really, really powerful effect, I think, especially as of right now in this format. However, we don't know all the other A-Specs that might be released in the future. Not 100% sure, but if Prime Catcher is the only one, maybe this sees play in some decks that don't need Prime Catcher, but I can't imagine there's going to be a ton of decks that decide I don't want Prime Catcher, I want Master Ball. Maybe that's the case, but Prime Catcher is just such a powerful card. It's going to be difficult to choose Master Ball, over that. But maybe in some decks like Lugia, for example, that really struggle to get Archeops in the discard pile, sometimes maybe this card will work out quite a bit. But anyways, that is going to do it for today. Let me know what you think of the brand new set. If you're looking for any of these cards, make sure to go check out GameGridSLC.com when the new set releases. And if you're looking for any cards or product in general, that is the place to go. You can use code SMARTTCG for 5% off your next order. The link will be one of the first things in the description. But anyways, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks for all the support as always. This is SmartTCG, and I'll speak with you again soon. Peace out, everyone.